Most men will claim they hate being alone. They say solitude is unbearable, that the silence is too loud, too heavy, too empty. But this is a lie wrapped in weakness. The truth is far more uncomfortable and far more revealing. What they truly fear is not loneliness, it is reflection. It is the confrontation that happens when the distractions fall away, when no one is there to validate them, to clap for their performance, to hold up the illusions they wear like armor. Alone, there are no masks to wear, no games to play, no social mirrors to distort their image. Alone, they are forced to sit with the unfiltered version of themselves, and most can't stand what they see. In public, they are strong, they are confident, they are righteous, but that strength is borrowed from the attention of others. It is a fragile theater propped up by the validation of the crowd. Strip that away and you are left with the raw material, a man who may be undisciplined, lost, afraid, unprincipled. The kind of man who has never taken the time to examine his weaknesses, because he has always been too busy hiding them. Solitude is not painful in itself, it is neutral, it is a space, a void. What fills that void is what makes it unbearable, and that is self-awareness. A mirror with no distortion, no compliments, no filters, just the harsh truth, and for many, that truth is a threat. It whispers, or sometimes screams, about the potential they've wasted, the time they've squandered, the cowardice they've disguised as humility, the comfort zones they've built as prisons, and then convinced themselves were palaces. In the presence of others, it is easy to lie, to posture, to pretend, but alone the lies collapse. The echo chamber dies, and the internal voice, long suppressed, begins to speak. That voice is not kind. It does not flatter. It does not care about your feelings. It says what needs to be said, what you already know but have refused to hear. It reminds you of the moments you could have acted but didn't, of the strengths you could have cultivated but chose not to, of the truth you ran from while convincing yourself you were on a noble path. In that silence, you meet the judge that never forgets, never forgives laziness, never excuses cowardice. So men run. They surround themselves with noise, endless entertainment, endless company, endless motion. They would rather burn their lives in distraction than spend 1 hour alone with their unfiltered thoughts. They call it connection, fun, staying busy, but in reality it is evasion, a deep, instinctive fear of being alone with the one person they can't escape, themselves. They say they fear loneliness, but what they truly fear is being forced to ask the questions they've buried. Who am I without the world watching? What have I truly become? Am I proud of it? Or have I simply built a life so loud I can no longer hear the truth beneath it? When the crowd disperses and the noise fades, the performance ends. The mask, carefully crafted through years of social maneuvering, begins to slip. Most men are actors, not by profession, but by survival. They have learned to wear faces that are applauded, to speak words that are accepted, to move in ways that earn approval. Day after day, they play roles, the successful one, the loyal one, the strong one, but these are not identities. They are costumes, and like all costumes, they only serve their purpose when there is an audience to impress. What remains when no one is watching? That is what defines a man, not the mask he shows to others, but the face he sees in solitude. It is easy to appear disciplined when others are there to admire your habits. It is easy to appear moral when there are eyes judging your decisions. It is easy to act courageous when others are depending on you, but remove the witnesses and the truth is revealed. The man who seems virtuous may, in truth, be weak, behaving out of fear of social punishment. not out of principle. The man who appears confident may be hollow, driven by applause rather than internal strength. Solitude has a strange power. It unmasks, it reduces a man to his essence, and that essence, for many, is disappointing. Without the constant feedback of others, without the reinforcement of external validation, they no longer know how to define themselves. Their identity was never built from the inside out. It was stitched together from fragments of approval, of mimicry, of fear. Alone, they are nothing more than the unpracticed self, a stranger to their own reflection. And this is why many avoid solitude at all costs. Not because they dislike being alone, but because they dislike who they are when there is no script to follow. The performance gave them purpose. It gave them an audience to deceive, a reason to continue playing pretend. Without it, they must confront the raw, undecorated truth that they have spent more time crafting appearances than building substance. The man who is only strong in public is not strong. The man who only holds discipline when others are watching is not disciplined. These are shadows of character, not character itself. The real test is who you are in the quiet hours, when there is no one to applaud or to judge. That is when the true self rises, not the self you constructed for the world, but the one you buried beneath layers of performance. There is a fear that comes with this unveiling. The fear that maybe, just maybe, the man beneath the mask is not enough. That, without the praise, without the illusion, he is nothing more than a hollow shell, and rather than face that revelation, most choose to keep performing. They live their lives in rehearsal, never daring to meet the man behind the act. The modern world is filled with noise, endless, relentless noise. Not just sound, but stimulation. Notifications, conversations, entertainment, obligations, distractions. This noise is not accidental, it is sought out. People crave it, cling to it, drown in it willingly. They say it helps them cope, helps them unwind, helps them feel connected. But the truth is darker. Noise is not a remedy, it is a shield, a carefully constructed barrier to keep a man from hearing the one voice he cannot lie to, his own. Men do not seek noise for pleasure, they seek it for escape. The mind, when left alone, speaks truths that are often unbearable. It reminds a man of his failures, of the standards he betrayed, of the strength he could have developed, but chose not to. In the silence, the conscience becomes loud. It cuts through pretense and speaks in a tone that cannot be negotiated with. And that terrifies people more than any external threat ever could. So they run. They fill their days with endless input. They consume not for knowledge, not for growth, but for numbness. The screen becomes a drug, the chatter a sedative. Anything to avoid the stillness. Anything to avoid the moment where they must sit quietly and face themselves. They claim they are busy. They claim they are productive, but often they are simply hiding. Hiding from the mirror that silence places in front of them. In that mirror, things appear that they have worked hard to forget. The promises broken, the potential wasted. The lies told not to others, but to themselves. Silence does not flatter. It does not protect egos. It rips through delusion and exposes the rot. That is why it is feared. Not because it is empty, but because it is honest. The distractions of the world allow men to construct a false sense of identity. They can pretend they are disciplined by watching others train. They can feel wise by repeating quotes they do not live. They can feel righteous by attacking others online instead of confronting their own failures. The noise gives them the illusion of effort, the illusion of virtue, the illusion of strength. But these are illusions, fragile, temporary, meaningless when the world stops clapping. Without noise, without distraction, the illusions fall apart. A man is left with the reality of who he is, not who he pretends to be. And that confrontation, for many, is unbearable. So they scroll, they gossip, they binge, they flee. They treat their own mind like an enemy territory they dare not enter. They think they are managing stress. In truth, they are avoiding judgment. The most dangerous lies are the ones you tell yourself. And the easiest time to tell them is when you're surrounded by chaos. But the longer you avoid the silence, the more powerful that buried truth becomes. You are not running from boredom. You are running from the reckoning that comes when you finally hear the voice that's been waiting in the quiet all along. There is a kind of strength that cannot be taught in public, that cannot be acquired through applause or approval. It is not found in titles, nor in achievements that exist only to be admired by others. This strength is born in isolation, through the brutal confrontation with one's own limitations. Most men will never taste it, because most men avoid the battlefield of the self. They do not want to see what lies beneath the mask. They want comfort, not clarity. They want to be praised without being exposed. But power, true, unshakable power, begins only when a man stops running from his reflection. To face oneself without flinching is a violence that few are willing to commit. It requires a savage honesty, a willingness to tear apart the narratives that have protected the ego for years. It means acknowledging the parts of yourself that are lazy, cowardly, arrogant, weak. Not in front of others, not for display, but in private, where no one is watching and no reward waits at the end. This is where transformation begins, not with admiration, but with humiliation. A man must be broken by truth before he can rebuild himself with strength. The world is filled with men who have never truly met themselves. They carry dreams they have never pursued, principles they have never tested, morality they have never questioned, discipline they only adopt when seen. Their lives are driven not by purpose, but by optics, by how things appear, not by what things are. So they remain hollow, no foundation, no core, just noise, masks, and constant performance. But beneath all of that lies a dormant potential, a force that only awakens when they are stripped of everything external and forced to look inward. The man who endures that process, who subjects himself to the furnace of self-judgment, is the man who becomes dangerous. Not because he is violent, but because he is clear. He knows who he is and who he is not. He knows what he is capable of and what still must be earned. He is no longer swayed by flattery or destroyed by criticism, because neither define him. He has already seen the worst of himself. He has already dragged his ego into the dirt and killed the illusions that once ruled him. This kind of man is rare because the path to become him is filled with pain. Not the kind that comes from failure in the world, but the kind that comes from exposing your own lies. It is easier to train the body than to discipline the soul. Easier to win arguments than to admit ignorance. Easier to impress others than to impress the judge within. But the man who chooses the harder road, who seeks not comfort but clarity, not praise but progress, becomes untouchable. Because he needs nothing from the world that he has not already demanded of himself. Solitude is not a punishment, it is a crucible. It is the place where illusions die and a man's core is revealed. Most people imagine isolation as a weakness, as something to be pitied or feared. But that belief is a reflection of how unprepared they are to meet themselves. The weak see solitude as exile. The strong see it as opportunity. A man who enters isolation willingly, not to escape the world, but to understand himself, steps into a realm where most will never dare to go. It is there, in that silence, that the truth is no longer optional. It confronts you directly, without diplomacy, without comfort, without distraction. There are no shortcuts in solitude, no applause, no guidance, no external motivation. The only companion is your conscience. The only stimulus is the weight of your own thoughts. And most men break under that weight, not because it is too heavy, but because they have never trained themselves to carry it. They have always leaned on others for strength, on attention for validation, on chaos to keep them from having to think. But when you remove those crutches, when you strip away the noise and force a man to stand alone, only then do you see what he's truly made of. The weak fill their loneliness with addiction. They search for constant input to drown out the stillness. They need the presence of others to feel secure, because they have no inner structure of their own. Their self-worth is borrowed, their confidence artificial. But the man who embraces solitude as a forge becomes something else entirely. He becomes grounded, centered, dangerous not to others, but to the falsehoods that once controlled him. He builds a foundation that cannot be shaken because it was not gifted to him. It was earned in silence. There is no transformation without isolation. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly surrounded by applause. It does so alone in darkness, in struggle. The same is true for men. Growth demands space, not just physical, but mental and emotional. You must strip away the layers of noise, remove the expectations, abandon the performances, and then, only then, can the rebuilding begin. And what is built in that quiet is real. It is not based on trends or opinions. It is built from pain, from reflection, from raw experience. Solitude sharpens the mind the way a blade is sharpened on stone. It grinds against you, wears down your softness, demands that you become precise and deliberate. There is no room for excuses when no one else is there to hear them. There is no need to pretend when no one else is there to impress. You either do the work or you don't. You either change or remain as you are. And in that brutal clarity, a man becomes whole. Not through comfort, but through confrontation. Not through others, but through himself. The world outside becomes irrelevant because the battle inside has already been fought. You were never afraid of being alone. You were afraid of what solitude reveals. The silence doesn't lie, it reflects. And what it reflects is a man stripped of his illusions, his masks, his applause. It shows the truth, who you are when no one is watching, when there is no performance left to give. That truth is brutal. That truth is necessary, because only the man who dares to face it can begin to shape himself into something formidable. Others will keep running, into noise, into comfort, into distraction. Let them. You were not born to hide from yourself. You were born to confront, to conquer, to evolve. So step into the silence, not to escape the world, but to master the one thing that controls everything else, you.